Welcome to episode 429. What does healing look like when the nervous system no longer feels safe in the body or in the world? I'm joined by Sita Severson, and together we explore trauma-informed yoga, nervous system healing, and the slow rebuilding of trust in the body through yoga, Ayurveda, breath, and embodied awareness. This is a compassionate conversation for anyone navigating grief, burnout, recovery, or chronic stress. Welcome to the Elements of Ayurveda podcast. I'm your host, Colette. And if you're new to Ayurveda, I recommend starting with the first few episodes where I introduce the foundations of Ayurveda and the doshas. To learn more, work with me, or explore my offerings, you can visit elementshealingandwellbeing.com. And for podcast updates, join me on Instagram at Elements of Ayurveda Podcast. And before we begin, just a quick note to say that this podcast is for educational and inspirational purposes only. It's not intended as medical advice. Now let's dive into this episode. Hello and welcome back to the Elements of Ayurveda podcast. Today, I am very happy to welcome Sita Severson, who is the director of the Soul of Yoga Institute in San Diego, California. And Sita began her Ayurvedic practice in 2007 and has since taught and developed curriculum in meditation, yoga, and Ayurveda for Johns Hopkins University, Johns Hopkins Hospital, and the Department of Aging for Baltimore County. She is a published author and a featured teacher on the Shift Network and Wisdom from North. And Sita has worked with thousands of individuals as a Vedic counselor, supporting integrated health of body, mind, and spirit. She's a registered yoga teacher, certified yoga therapist, and an Ayurvedic practitioner. And she lives the Orvi life with her husband, 3 dogs, and a cat, and values humor as daily medicine. I love that. Sita, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, that's, I think, the most important point. Humor.
Exactly. Not to take ourselves too seriously. The world is too much going on already that we need to laugh a little.
Yes,
that's
always.
Great for healing. So from your bio, we see you're director of the Soul of Yoga Institute and you lead the educational programs there. Now, I have to tell you, I'm very familiar with the Soul of Yoga Institute because I lived in Encinitas for several years. Down the road from the Soul of Yoga Institute. So I frequented there a lot and it was more than a studio. It was a real sanctuary. So tell us a little bit about the Soul of Yoga Institute.
Well, it really has a fun history, actually. A monk from the Self-Realization Fellowship has started it, actually. So he fell in love and had to leave the ashram life. And he really missed the yoga and the meditation and really wanted to bring it to the community. So he and his wife started Soul of Yoga actually in their home. And once they outgrew their home and the neighbors were complaining about all the cars and all of that, they got an actual physical space. And so even though they have since sold it to our now, the owner, Ryan Stanley, who's really, really a wonderful conscious leader. It still has the essence of the soul of yoga. I think the name is just so appropriate. And, a lot of people, like you said, it really is a sanctuary. There is something that you can feel when you enter the space. And I do believe that is from just its origins and the roots and the intention that was behind it from the beginning. I feel that that's still very much alive.
Oh, it's so beautiful. And I used to go there and I knew Tom and Trish, the owners of it. And I think as well, Encinitas is such a special place because the Self-Realization Fellowship is there, the gardens, and it's such a great energy.
Yes.
In that area.
It really is magical. There, I'm originally from the East Coast of the United States, and it was actually in a meditation that I was guided to move to San Diego. And I was seeing images of a place I had never been, but I intuitively knew it was San Diego. And there really is a magic that calls people to it, I think. And it's whether you visit or you come and stay, there really is that felt experience of being in something special, whether you can name it or not.
Absolutely. That's what I felt. I was really drawn there for no particular reason, and had an amazing time there. Loved it.
I love that.
Yeah, it was great. See, I'd love to talk now about your own journey, which you've been quite open about. And I'd love for you to share some of your own personal journey with healing and how those experiences shape the way that you teach and work with trauma today.
Yeah. So thank you for that question. I do share my story very openly. I feel that all of us have a story, and sharing story is really healing. I think even just hearing other people's stories, because I know for me, it's part of what really helped me in my own healing journey is to hear other people. I myself, in early on in life, really, I was about 17 years old, and I experienced several back-to-back traumatic experiences within about an 18-month time period. And in that time, I also lost both of my grandparents who helped raise me, and they passed away 3 months apart from each other. So to say it was an intense time in my life is really an understatement. And, being 17, always actually having been a spiritual seeker, even in my earlier years, I didn't really have the foundation or the tools to see myself through that. I think even someone with the strongest foundation having a series of things like that is going to be pretty hard, right? But at 17 with little foundation and emotional maturity, I'm sure, it really took a toll on me. And so really over a period of a few years, I ended up being agoraphobic. So for those of you who don't know what that is, that meant I didn't leave my home for 2 years. I dropped out of college. I self-medicated with alcohol and food and marijuana, and I ended up on a lot of medications. I was diagnosed with bipolar. I was diagnosed with all of these different things and ended up on 13 different medications, half of which were to manage basically the side effects of the first half of the medications I was on. And the combination of all those things made my weight really, really get just, I was really overweight. And I don't say that in a body shaming kind of way. I really, for my frame, I was easily about 80, 90 pounds overweight. And so, I had a moment after a few years of that where, I was very isolated. I didn't have a lot of people left in my life. And I was lying in bed one night and I just heard this voice with clarity that said, "You got yourself into this, get yourself out." And it was a really special moment for me, because with that came, I think, a tremendous amount of courage or grace. I mean, there's a lot of things that we could call it, because had I had heard that even 6 months earlier, I would have been so overwhelmed at the idea that my behaviors or anything that I was doing was contributing to what I was experiencing in my life. And again, that's not to say that when life hits us hard and we sort of feel like we're a victim to life, that's a very real feeling, and I do think that there comes a point for most of us where we get to this threshold where we can make another choice. And that was that moment for me. It was very pivotal. And so it was literally the next day I went and spoke to my mother, who was a recovering alcoholic. And I said, "I've been self-medicating. That's part of the problem. I see it now. And I really need help." But I said to her how scared I was to even talk to her about it, because I was so afraid that once I shared this admission that I would have to stop. And I was still shaky on, can I really stop? And bless my mother, she said, "You don't have to do anything. I'm just so grateful that you shared." And so I actually ended up going to an AA meeting with a bunch of people I knew. They were my parents' friends. But I ended up going to an AA meeting and finding a really great sponsor and finding an incredible therapist. And I was 20 years old. This was 1998. I still have not had a drop of alcohol since. And, that really started my journey, but it has deeply informed my ability, but also my desire to deeply connect with people where they are, because I understand from lived experience how much life can really kick us. And it doesn't matter how quote unquote evolved we think we are, or there comes times in our life where we can feel really scared, lost, abandoned by a greater force, whatever we might call it. And it might feel like even the tools that we have accumulated aren't helping. There's really moments that. And so I like to really partner with people, whoever I'm with. I really like to be with them in I like to say proximity to their pain. So that they don't feel so alone, because I think that was the hardest part for me, was I felt so alone in my agony, and it really was agony. So yeah, I mean, that was a long answer, but it's still the short version.
Well, I appreciate that. You broke up a little bit when you were saying, I like to partner with people. Mm-hmm. So you like to partner with people, meeting them where they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I call it proximity to their pain, not shying away from what they are experiencing and not trying to change anyone's mind about the experience that they're having, but really just sit with them and be present with them in it. So whether it's asana or whether it's breathing or, teaching a new tool that they can do that's really simple, whatever it is, I'm not trying to change anyone's mind or anyone's feelings, because I know what it's like to have people try to fix me. Yeah. And for me, that's not the approach that works.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, first of all, for sharing your story and being so open. And I think a lot of us who work in this area, we've gone through our own healing journey, and yes. You went through a lot in very young years, tender years, 17, like before your 20s, you had experienced so much, mm-hmm. But with that comes great wisdom from a lived experience, right? And you use that experience, and you can really connect with people more so than those of us who have not gone through something like that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And that's really special and really important to me, because, it's not wasted, and that's, I don't think anything's wasted, but I like to behave as if nothing is wasted. And I like to give back. I love to give back. I love to be able to let people know they're not alone.
Yeah. And that's wonderful. And I think it's very important for the people you're working with as well, who have gone through some sort of trauma, that they know that you've been there and you really understand that experience. Yeah. And, there may be some people listening now who are in recovery or burnout or even grief and feel disconnected from their bodies. What does rebuilding trust in the body look like when the nervous system has learned, in whatever circumstances, the world doesn't feel safe? Like in your case, you shut yourself off for 2 years because you were just completely going inward.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another great question. You're reminding me of when the first thing that I started doing, and this was, again, I was so young, so I hadn't studied anything, but I was really guided by something deep inside. And there was a moment. So I was bulimic for a time, and I was newly sober, and I was feeling the urge to binge eat. And of course, after that, I would purge. And I remember just this feeling of pause. And that was a really different experience for me, because compulsion was just something I lived by. And I had this moment where I thought, wait a second. Not that I labeled myself bulimic. It wasn't even about labels. It was, wait a second, I'm wanting to live differently. If I do this, I'm not living differently. So what choice can I make in this moment that would be more useful for me in what I am wanting to create? And in that moment, I realized what I really needed to do was go for a walk and then journal. And as simple as that sounds, it was a true, honest moment of me tuning in and tapping in and not trying to make any huge waves in my life. It was my first step of actually deciding to tune in and see what was going on beneath this compulsive desire that I had, and to just ask myself the honest question, what else could I do? What other choice could I make? And so I think really the big message for me in that is the practice of deeply listening to ourselves, even if it feels scary, and understanding that even the smallest choice can have the biggest effects. And it's one of the things, skip to in the Ayurvedic world, which I know you know very, very well. I was so delighted when I really grasped that something important in a lot of Ayurvedic practices is we're not going to do 5,000 things at once and try to aggressively change this person or situation. That's usually not how these foundational changes really take root or shift anything. And I felt so validated. I mean, my life at that point was a validation, but I think sometimes with a nervous system that is already dysregulated, we can overwhelm it even more by contemplating or thinking about all the things that we need to do, or all the things we need to change, or all the things we need to be, that is really just coming from that state of dysregulation. And when we can just take a moment to pause and instead learn to be really gentle on ourselves and ask, what is the most gentle, loving, kind, nourishing choice that I could make in this moment? And just letting that sort of be an open inquiry, I really feel like that opens the door to learning how to re-regulate ourselves in a natural way. And again, we can't re-regulate in a therapeutic way if we're being aggressive about it, because that's what the nervous system is accustomed to. And so we could actually instead sort of be cementing these patterns that we're actually trying to heal. So to me, the gentle, kind, nourishing approach to really tuning into the self is paramount.
Absolutely, indeed. And as you said, Ayurveda and yoga work on this rather than the quick fix. It's the gentle approach and the building blocks and building up that foundation, and also empowering the person, the individual, to be an integral part of their healing journey, right?
Absolutely.
So important.
It's so important.
And can you share with people how people may feel dysregulation in their body and mind? How do chronic stress or grief or burnout show up in the body's physiology? Just to give people examples of that. And maybe then move on to how yoga, Ayurveda, pranayama can interrupt those patterns without overwhelming the system, like you just talked about.
Yeah. So, obviously everyone is different, but a lot of the common themes that we could see to indicate a nervous system that's dysregulated are things like brain fog, feeling really scattered, feeling exhausted, feeling overwhelmed easily. Sometimes that's even overwhelmed by noise and environment. Now, I understand that, there are those who have a more sensitive nervous system and they're not necessarily dysregulated. So that's a very real thing as well. However, who might not like a loud noise or something like that. But there is often, with someone who's living with dysregulation, there are very much environmental factors that if there is constant stimulation, or the need for constant stimulation is often another signal that there is some sort of dysregulation going on, because, physiologically we have these patterns, right? I mean, it's a very biological thing. We have these patterns, which means that there is some kind of stimuli, often environmental in this case, that will set off a chain of events of chemistry in the body. And when a nervous system is so accustomed to these chemicals that are released in the body that are really a stress response, when that's not happening, the feeling of calm or peace can actually feel incredibly threatening. So that's another signal. Like if you feel really anxious, or just unhinged, or more scattered, or don't know what to do with yourself when things are calm and peaceful, this is often another indication of that. And so the ways to meet it are, finding something like a yin or a gentle hatha type of practice. If the asana portion of things is something that calls to you, it certainly doesn't have to be the way. But rather than looking for, like, a lot of people love their heated yoga or their hot yoga. That's actually not appropriate for everyone. The things that can be really jarring or really intense are often the things that we might feel called to, but aren't necessarily what's going to be the most therapeutic. So for someone who is working to re-regulate, finding the things that are less stimulating, I would even say don't listen to the radio when you're in the car, and breathe, just starting to repattern. But you were mentioning pranayama too. It's really just being aware of the breath and letting ourselves take a full breath. There was a time where there was some stress in my life, and I could feel that I was becoming a little more dysregulated, and I actually put alerts in my daily calendar that reminded me to just take a breath. That's simple. Just having that awareness to just take a full deep breath actually can start to work with the nervous system and remind it that it can re-regulate itself. And I think this is one of the really important things to remember, and that we can lose touch with. We are such intelligent beings. We really are an act of nature. We are an expression of nature. And there is an inherent intelligence. Even if we feel disconnected from that intelligence, the resilience of our systems has an intelligence that once we start to give it new patterns, even just a couple of conscious breaths throughout the day, it will actually start to activate this intelligence to the point where we'll start to think of that breath a little bit more, and we'll start to dive into different breathing techniques, maybe like Nadi Shodhana, for example, which is one a lot of people are familiar with, that really is, shown to work with brain function. I mean, the yogis have been saying that for thousands of years, and science is catching up, as it is with a lot of things. But really, working with the brain and the neural pathways and things like that, just by something as simple as alternate nostril breathing. And Ayurvedically speaking, oftentimes you've got to be careful with this, because there really isn't like a, hey, let's slap this solution on. And just working with oil. I'm such a big fan of working with oil, that has oil like sesame oil, or, the oleation, the work that we do, massaging your feet before bed at night, massaging around your ears before bed at night, not having screens on before bed, and just lying in bed after putting a little oil on yourself and taking a few deep breaths. These are very simple practices that we can use to just start that regulation, the re-regulation patterns that will start to amount to more and more and more and more. It does have an accumulative effect, just like everything else does.
Absolutely. And essentially, as you're saying, we're taking the body out of the sympathetic nervous system, whereas in fight or flight mode, scanning the environment, due to a past trauma, constantly on that scanning mode. Am I safe? And then through these very simple practices of yoga and Ayurveda, that we're bringing the body and teaching the body that you're safe, and that we're bringing the body back into the parasympathetic, the rest and digest, and that we want to keep the body out of that constant fight or flight, right? Which it goes into for protection mode during trauma or during some traumatic event. But we want to teach the body it's okay now. You don't have to stay there. And so these practices, while very simple, and as you said, they're cumulative over time, they require a dedication to them, right? They're simple practices. We always, in Ayurveda and yoga, we tailor them to each individual to make sure there's no overwhelm. They're very simple, tailored to the person's lifestyle and so on. But how, it's not a quick fix is what I'm saying. These practices, we want them to be sustainable in a person's lifestyle because we want to teach the person and empower the person going forward to take care of themselves. But how do you keep people engaged with the process because it is longer term, because you're essentially changing the way they live life, especially when they're looking for relief now, right? They're looking for the relief now, but you're teaching them, no, this is a lifestyle change. This is not a quick fix. How do you work with people?
Yeah, that is a great question, because I think a lot of people are in that category, especially when you're talking about it not being a quick fix. And that's where it does get really interesting, because it's easy to want to be like, oh, just do this and it'll get better. And that isn't always the case, and I do find that one very important thing that can help people, a lot of people, of course, not everyone, stay on track is start doing that simple practice. Do it one day at a time. Like we would say in a 12-step program, like just focus on the day or focus on the morning, whatever you feel like you have the capacity for. And the key thing is to do whatever it is, whether it's pranayama or whether it's 10 minutes of an asana practice, no matter what you choose. And then tune into yourself and notice how you feel. And I feel like this is often a missing step, because sometimes even these tools that we have can become more of a check the box thing. Well, I did the thing. And then we go about our day like, okay, well, I did what I was supposed to do. Now what? And let me just go on with my life, which does speak a little bit more to the dysregulation, because it's like, okay, on to the next thing. When really, once we have an experience where we can notice that, maybe I can't put my name on it, but I do kind of feel a subtle shift here. I do feel a subtle shift. Once we start to feel those shifts, it will often switch something for us, because we recognize that there is some kind of relief that could come by way of it. Now, and it's also very true that for some people, it really is blind faith, right? Some people are, I know this was me at a time. I was cut off enough for myself that I probably could not have felt the subtle shifts that were happening. And I know that that's very true for a lot of people. And so I was certainly guided, but there was a lot of blind faith involved, and really just the desire to not be in pain anymore. So initially it wasn't about, growing or even getting better so much as it was, I don't want to be in pain anymore. And so I don't even care what it takes. But so to be honest, this is where having a teacher, or this is actually how some people come into our training programs, is not because they actually want to be a teacher of yoga or Ayurveda or anything like that. It's more that they want to deepen their own practice. They want to deepen their tools and start to be held accountable in a different way. So it becomes a field of study, not so much because they're looking for something dharmic or, career focus, but they're really looking at how do I deeply put myself in community and in a space that will help foster me starting to show up differently and learn how to have an actual practice, which literally can be 10 minutes a day if that's what you got. I mean, that's the other thing. Going back to, this doesn't have to be a grand gesture. In fact, if it's not something that you can sustain and do consistently, then I would highly recommend that you don't do that. Don't start with an hour and a half, like I'm going to do the meditation practice and the pranayama and the asana. And if that doesn't work for your lifestyle, I wouldn't even start there. Just find something that you can do for 10 minutes and let that be enough. But people do find teachers or take trainings or even sign up for memberships at places so that they have a different level of accountability and they have more community. I think community can really help with that kind of accountability.
Absolutely. And can you tell us a bit about, trauma-informed yoga and how that practice differs? Do you offer that at the Soul of Yoga?
We do. So there are many of our teachers, a few I can think of. Flossie's one of them, and she's actually Trisha's sister, so yes, she's still around. Yeah, she's amazing. And like Monique Launer, who was she started our yoga therapy program and our advanced training. She's since retired. That's actually who I replaced. But even though, for example, the two of them don't put on the schedule, this is trauma informed. That's all they do. It's trauma informed. And we do train on that as well, because most people have trauma these days. It comes in so many different forms, but most people, whether it's trauma related or not, the majority of people have nervous system dysregulation. And a lot of that is just through the way the world is right now. And so I think it's critical that these kinds of classes are taught. And so yes, we do have those classes and trainings. And the way that it's most different is there is the asana practice, there is a deep awareness about the breath and a deep awareness about tuning into your body and finding your way of flowing from one posture to another. So there's space to give yourself permission to be guided by a teacher, but not necessarily told what to do, if you will. That's actually really important as we learn to re-regulate and become sovereign beings that are learning how to trust ourselves and to trust our bodies, having the space to explore the movement a little bit, even in an asana practice. But also the way that we speak and the words that we use are incredibly important because, many people who have things with the nervous system in varying degrees, we may have a sensitivity to language. There are words that can feel aggressive, and they can feel uncomfortable. And so there is this idea that holding space in a trauma-informed way is creating the safest container possible for the person to come in and know that they're being held. And so there's a way that you learn to hold the space for the person so they don't have to think about what time is it? Am I safe in this room? Am I going to have to fend off an aggressive word, or it's, come in and just be able to be with yourself. And so there's a lot of nuance actually to trauma-informed trainings. I know there's a lot of buzzwords and sort of trendy things that come with it. But to be honest, when we're really looking at recovery and healing from these events or traumas, or even, sometimes it's not that people have had their own trauma, it's that they come from a family who's experienced trauma. And so trauma is just in the body. It's just there. And there's, I don't think there's quite a lot spoken about that quite so much. We do talk about that in our trainings. And so there really is something important about holding a total space where the teacher is guiding, and so that the person can just come and be as they are and know that they are safe. And also we talk about it being a brave space. It's a brave space where you get to really sit within yourself, which is what yoga or asana is designed to help us do.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned there, some people may grow up in a traumatic environment, and that is the norm. and their nervous system has never experienced anything different. And therefore, because it's the norm, it's almost, it can become sometimes a comfort blanket, right? And many people sometimes can fear or wonder who they become after the grief, after the addiction, after the burnout. From your work, how does healing with Ayurveda and yoga open the door to self-actualization rather than just symptom relief?
Yeah, what a beautiful question. Because I think it's easy in our Western sort of more allopathically oriented minds to go after, just like I was saying, I just didn't want to feel the pain anymore. And for some people, that's a great first step. For me, that was a great first step, but that wasn't the end all be all. And so this is where here again, the space holding and recognizing that as we release patterns, which is really what yoga and meditation, or asana and meditation and Ayurveda are helping us do. They're helping us disrupt and shed patterns on different levels of being and redirecting these patterns so that they can reorganize themselves for us to be more self-sustaining, sovereign, and thriving and vital. That's what all of these are for. And so making sure that there is support when people are coming into themselves. It is a huge threshold to cross when you're so accustomed to being one thing and one way. And then all of a sudden you start recognizing things within yourself that you hadn't noticed before. You know, I see people start coming into gifts that they didn't know they have, or the things that they loved to be or do as a child that they put away years ago. It starts to come back, and they recognize that part of their imbalance has been that they didn't have the space to do something that was really, really important to their soul. And, you know, I will often say that, you know, we may have our own homecoming with ourselves, is the way that I like to phrase it. And not everyone in our life is ready to come to a celebratory party over it. So that's the other thing that is really important that we do discuss in our training is, you know, even with our family and friends who love us dearly, many are accustomed and attached to the person that we've always been, right? Because the relationships that we have create a certain dynamic. And when we start to change that dynamic without the blessing or the permission of someone else, it can really challenge other people. And so whether we're conscious of it or not, that can actually feel deeply threatening, right? Because then we start to go back into my safety feels threatened. What if it's my spouse? Or what if I can't do the same work that I've always done because it's no longer a fit for me. And so these are all the places where trusting yoga and trusting the Ayurveda, trusting the process that your inherent nature came here with a certain design and came here to express itself in a very beautiful way that it already knows how to express itself. And so the support as people uncover that does come by way, I feel, of really great teachers and really great community. Which is why, you know, having a studio or going to a studio or going into a training, which I understand is also, it's a very privileged thing to be able to do. But there are plenty of places that we can find online. I think I think the resources can be a little overwhelming these days, but there are online resources where community can come together in safe space for no cost or low cost or donation based, where others can help you midwife this part of yourself that is coming into being. And you can do that for others too, which is incredibly rewarding.
Is there a simple reflection or maybe a pranayama practice that you might offer listeners who are navigating stress right now, or, you know, they're in recovery, a simple practice that they can take away today that maybe we could practice right now for a moment or two?
Yeah, I love that. So a simple practice, and I'll say that I would like us to focus on the space in between our two eyes, so in between the eyebrows, but don't strain, please. We'll close our eyes. We won't strain, and we'll just sort of guide the eyes up towards what we would call the third eye. And keeping in mind that we're really working once again with brain function, and we're working with the unconscious part of the mind, because this is a big piece of this becoming and re-regulation. So let's go ahead and close the eyes. Not if you're driving, though.
Good tip.
Safety first. And just take a deep breath. Just take a deep breath and relax your shoulders and find a relaxed alertness in the spine where there's some length to it without strain. And just notice how your body can be held by gravity, can be held in the space that you're in. And perhaps you're going to bring your chin in just slightly. And so the eyes are, if they were open, would be looking towards the horizon. That's not for your eyes specifically. That's just for how you want your head centered. And when you're ready, if it feels good for you, I invite you to take your eyes and just orient them up towards the center point in between your brows. And as you breathe, I invite you to imagine that your breath is going in and out through that third eye space. And if it feels good, imagining a light coming in and out with your breath. There's no need to monitor. Go where you're guided. And then in your own natural time, taking that breath and the light along with it if you choose, down through the throat, dropping into the heart center. And notice the experience of your breath coming in and out through your heart space. Feeling your chest expand fully and contract fully with each breath. And then sending your breath throughout your entire body, letting it circulate from that heart center, circulating everywhere. You can take the light along with it if you'd like. And perhaps notice the pulse throughout your whole body. Pulsing breath, pulsing light. And then dropping down into your root just briefly. And becoming aware of whichever parts of yourself are touching the earth or the surface that is physically supporting you. Taking a deep inhalation and a big exhalation, expelling anything that you'd like to relieve your system of. Grounding into the earth. Grounding into the body. And when you feel ready, letting your eyes flutter open naturally.
That was lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I think your doggy loved it too. I could hear him deep belly breathing beside you.
I know. Her name's Yogi too, the irony.
I could hear your doggy doing the deep belly yoga breath.
She's well trained, or actually, I think she trains us.
She was blissed out in that moment.
So funny.
So cute. Sita, thank you. That was really lovely and a great practice that people can take. But to finish up here, but I'd love to offer you the time so that you could share with the listeners a little bit more about the offerings of Sola Yoga Institute. And I'll link to all this in the show notes as well. But please share what your offerings are.
Yeah, thank you. So at the Institute, we have a 200-hour yoga teacher training. And one of the things that's really fun about our 200-hour program is that you do 150 hours of the foundational studies that you would find in really all, Yoga Alliance certified 200-hour trainings, but we offer a 50-hour specialty path. So in your 200-hour, you can specialize in, we have yin, we have gentle hatha, we have vinyasa, and we have kundalini. And not so much the Western version of kundalini as taught by Yogi Bhajan. We've kind of stepped away from that a bit. But going with a little bit more of, I'll say traditional practices. They're really probably just a couple hundred years old, just for, full disclosure and honesty. I know there's a lot of conversation about Kundalini. But we do have these 50-hour specialty tracks. And so in our 200-hour, you can specialize in as many tracks of those as you want just by taking a 50-hour with your 200 hours. So that I think is really special and really fun. And then we have our advanced training. So we have a 300-hour program for those who want to be 500 hours certified. And with that one, you can actually choose your own path. We have so many different offerings with that one. We have a 50 hours in Ayurveda. We have, once again, we have yin. We have yoga for heart disease and cancer recovery. We have a lot of different modules that you can take in our advanced studies program that can give you the 500-hour registered yoga teacher, but you get to specialize in anything that you want. But this, I think, is fun too. We also have another 300-hour program that we call the Bridge program. And it's the bridge into yoga therapy. But it's for people who may or may not be ready to take on something like yoga therapy, which we offer as well. So, if you haven't been teaching for a year, but you're really interested in possibly being a yoga therapist, we have that program. So you're basically starting the yoga therapy track. So you're doing a lot of that work. But again, you're not biting off the full enchilada. But in that you get to study some of our specializations as well. And then of course we have our yoga therapy program, which is it's about a 2 to 5 year program, depending on your lifestyle. And we have everything from trauma-informed to mental and emotional wellness to yoga for grief, again, heart disease, cancer recovery, subtle anatomy, philosophy, you name it. It's a very robust program. And then we actually have a master's in dual, master's program. So you have to have a bachelor's for that, but you get your yoga therapy certification in addition to a master's in integral health. And that's through California Institute, CIHS, we call it, of Human Sciences. We have a lot of offerings that I think are really very interesting and give a lot of depth with the study. We do some really cool programs with Leslie Kaminoff, who's pretty well known in the physical anatomy space. He's one of our teachers. We have Dr. Richard Miller. So he teaches our iRest program for us. So with our yoga therapy, you also get certified in breathwork, and you also get certified in iRest. So that's really fun too. We have a really robust breathwork program that's actually open enrollment. We actually have James Nestor teaching for us in June, I think it is, and that's pretty fun. But I'm very excited about that one. That was one that I got to put together. It's really fantastic. But I think one of the things that makes our programs really special is that we're completely hybrid. So there's a lot of trainings where people have to choose whether to be online only or all recordings or in person. With us, you can do it any which way. So we have live trainings and you can be there via Zoom and be live in the room with us. We have 2 big screen TVs and lots lots of microphones. And so it's very cohesive. The people who are in our physical institute and the people who are online, we're all engaging together. And I think that's something that makes us really special, that you get the recordings or you're there live or you're there in person or any combination of those things. And I really love the accessibility of that because I think, lives are busy. But when we feel called to study, like I know I have done this in my life many times. I'm a lifelong student and I always want to be studying, but my life doesn't always want me to be studying. And so when I do, it's like I need something that can meet me where I am. And I do feel like that's one of the places that the Institute really shines.
Yeah, that was a big question I was going to have for you. Is it just in-house or online? So it's wonderful that it's hybrid and you can mix it up whatever way works for your lifestyle, which is fantastic. It makes it so much more accessible to people.
Yeah,
that's
definitely.
wonderful. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. As I said, I will put all those links in the show notes as well. And as we close out, is there anything else that you wanted to share, Sita, before we finish up?
I think the biggest message is, one thing that anyone can start to, for lack of a better way of saying it, work on is just in any given moment, ask yourself, what do I need right now? And am I willing to give it to myself? Because I really feel like just having that as an open inquiry, whether you're willing to give it to yourself in that moment or not, or can or can't, it almost doesn't matter. It's just allowing yourself to have the space to have needs and to know that your needs are important and to really lean into a wisdom that is always there. It's just sometimes it's a little more covered up.
Beautiful advice. Sita, thank you so much. It was lovely to chat with you. And thank you for sharing all this today. I think it will help a lot of people.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Sita, and please check out the show notes for all the links mentioned. And if you think that this episode will be helpful to family or friends, please share it with them. And I would appreciate a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. And don't forget to follow or subscribe so the new episodes download automatically. And come join me on social media. On Instagram, it's Elements of Ayurveda Podcast. And on Facebook, it's Elements Healing and Wellbeing. Until next time, take good care of yourself, be well, and bye for now. Slán go fóill.